Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this is the Microsoft Surface Pro X. Now, I got a quick hands-on with this at Microsoft's launch event late last year, along with what seemed like hundreds of other Surface devices. But for me, the Pro X kind of stood out, not just because it looks good and it's slimmer than the regular Surface Pro, but because of what's inside, because of the processor, which sounds kind of boring, but bear with me. This is actually one of the most interesting laptop slash tablet slash two-in-one things that we've seen in a long time. So instead of regular Intel or AMD CPUs that you get in other Surface models or pretty much any other laptop on the market, the Pro X uses an ARM chip, which is not this kind of ARM, but the kind of ARM processor that you get in your smartphone. And while these tend to be more efficient and often offer better battery life than traditional laptop processors, they're slower, and compatibility with the apps and programs that you and me use every day can mean that this has some serious limitations. So that doesn't sound like a great start, and to be honest, the price of this doesn't help either. Right now you can pick the Pro X up from about £900, but that's the entry-level spec. And once you add the keyboard, the pen, which you really do need to make this worthwhile, we're looking at about £1,200. And that's about the same as a much more powerful Surface Pro 7, again with the accessories. Here's one I made earlier. So you really are paying a premium for this, but is it actually worth it? So there are issues with speed, compatibility, and price, which we'll come back to in a second, but on the positive side of things, well, the Pro X looks and feels incredible. The screen is brilliant, battery life is better than any equivalent Intel machine, we get 4G LTE connectivity, and because of its size and lightweightness, I think that's a word, it's just a pleasure to carry around and use. You would barely feel this in your backpack. And while what I said about this not being able to run native Windows apps is technically true, it actually can in some cases via software emulation, although that is more of a workaround than a proper solution, and just because it runs doesn't mean it runs well. But sticking with the positives for a second, this is an absolutely stunning device with this matte black aluminium chassis, although I hope you like fingerprints because it's a bit of a magnet. The curved edges look great. Again, if I bring the Surface Pro 7 in and put it side by side with the Pro X, you can just see the difference here. It's 15% thinner, we lose the side vents, and it has way thinner bezels. So overall, it just kind of looks like the next generation of the 2020 model of the Surface Pro 7, because this hasn't really changed an awful lot in the last few years. And I'm still a huge fan of this stand, which comes on all Surface models. It sits flush with the body when stowed like that, and then you can use it at any angle you like. It's just a lovely thing, you know? That said, when you're using it on your lap, the keyboard feels far less stable than a regular laptop keyboard, and the stand can feel a little too close to the edge of your knee sometimes. The 13-inch screen is bright, colorful, and high resolution, but it's the 3:2 aspect ratio that I really love about this, which is a little bit taller than you get on most laptops, and just having that extra bit of vertical space just makes it feel so much less constrained for working and browsing. Color accuracy is more than good enough for most of us, although it's not quite professional grade. Now I have to say, one of the most impressive and kind of surprising features of the Pro X is just how good the cameras are. I'm shooting this with a front-facing 5-megapixel camera. It can shoot 1080p 30 video. We also get dual array microphones, so hopefully the audio quality is quite good. And of course we've got that separate IR sensor for Windows Hello Face Unlock. But then around the back we have a 10-megapixel camera as well, which can shoot up to 4K video, which is not something you find very often outside of, say, the iPad Pro. And as you can see, the quality is really good, and we get a nice wide angle, there's not much noise, the colors are pretty accurate. So if you're planning on using this for web chat, call, video, Skype things, then it's worth bearing in mind. It's very, very good. The signature type cover I've got here is pretty good actually. It's lightweight, it doesn't add too much to the overall size of the Pro X, although I don't know if I love the Alcantara material. Although like any of the Surface Pro devices, it does feel a little bit flimsy, especially, as I say, if you're using it on your lap. It is backlit though, and the keys have a nice responsive feel to them. And also the glass trackpad is nice and smooth and has a decent click action. Although it is a bit on the small size, I think it would really benefit for being a bit taller. The best bit though is the secret compartment for the pen. If you just pull the keyboard away a little bit, you can see it's got two levels of magnets, so you can use it either completely flat or up like that. And when it is in that position, it hides the pen. But if you have it down and out like that, then you can just pull it out and you've got your little stylus here. And all you have to do is just plonk it back in and it'll start charging. As for the pen itself, this is what Microsoft call their Surface Slim Pen. I actually really like it. It's light, it's easy to hold, and it offers 4,096 levels of pressure on the screen, so it is really, really responsive, and it becomes second nature after a while, and I even find myself using it to navigate around the screen. Okay, let's talk performance. And the Surface Pro X is powered by Microsoft's SQ1 processor, which is a custom Qualcomm chip but with slightly higher clock speeds. Now, compared to the Intel i5-based Surface Pro 7, in Geekbench, the Pro X was 38% slower in single and multi-threaded tasks. And while this is closely related to a smartphone chip, it doesn't support games made for phones either. That said, it does turn on quickly, opening apps is speedy, and using Office, browsing, and basic work apps feels like it would on a regular PC. Sometimes though, multitasking can feel a bit sluggish, especially after a recent wake-up. So far, so good then, but now I'm gonna have to use the C word. Compatibility. Because being an ARM-based processor, the SQ1 in here runs completely different code to regular x86 PC processors like you get in your desktop or your laptop or even the Surface Pro 7. And it also means the Pro X uses Windows 10 on ARM, which is basically Windows that's been tweaked to run on ARM-based systems, and Microsoft reckon that 95% of the software that most users like you and I want to use on this type of device will work here, either natively or through software emulation. But I think most of the programs will be the latter, so it could be a little bit misleading. On the plus side, the Windows 10 store filters for native Windows on ARM apps, so you can't install apps that won't work, and the list of options are slowly growing. But when it comes to emulation of programs designed for regular Windows, right now it's limited to ones that support 32-bit only. How big of a deal that is really comes down to you and what programs you use. For me, I tend to use the Adobe Suite quite a bit, and I was only able to install older 32-bit versions of apps, and Premiere Pro and Lightroom, which are the two programs that I use pretty much all the time, didn't even appear as options to install at all. Adobe have said that they are re-engineering their apps to run natively on ARM at some point. However, compatibility is really only half the battle. And while basic drawing and graphics work in Illustrator was okay, a bit laggy maybe, performance in Photoshop was downright bad. For anything other than simple cutouts and text, it's just too slow and laggy. And while this is a fairly complex program, it underlines the serious performance overhead with emulation, and mean these apps feel a lot slower than they should do, given the benchmark results we get from this. Microsoft do say though that they are working on support for 64-bit emulation this year, so hopefully that will improve things, but for now, there's a lot of problems with this. But what about battery life? This is supposed to be one of the areas that the Pro X excels at, and the good news is, it does, but perhaps not to the extent that you might think. Microsoft claim around 13 hours in their test, but I managed just over 9.5 hours of full screen video at 50% brightness, which is pretty good considering the size, resolution, and brightness of the screen, and also that the Surface Pro 7 got 5.5 hours in the same test, so this does last significantly longer. With mixed use, I managed around 8.5 hours of light office use and watching videos throughout the day, so this will comfortably get you through a full workday. I was also surprised how good the sound is on the Pro X. It's a lot punchier than you may think. Bass is still lacking a little bit, which is especially noticeable at higher volumes, but most of the time it sounds good. My one issue though, and it's a big issue, and that's that we don't get a 3.5mm headphone jack. Now, I get that with this kind of next-gen ultra-portable device, maybe it's forgivable, and also we're in 2020, but if you want to use a pair of headphones with this, they're gonna have to be wireless, Bluetooth, or you're gonna have to connect it via the USB-C port. Speaking of connectivity, and the big news is that we also get onboard 4G and LTE, which is great for working on the go and without having to bother with tethering or hotspotting from your phone. And it's not something we find on other Surface devices. As for ports, we get two USB Type-Cs, as well as the Surface connector, which is reversible and used for charging, but also allows for some connection options via the mind-blowingly expensive Surface dock. So I'm really happy we get USB-C. It's something we've been asking Microsoft for years. But the downside of this is, I guess because there's no Intel chip inside, it doesn't support Thunderbolt 3. The question is though, why choose the Pro X over its Intel-based brother, the Surface Pro 7? I mean, it's not far off in terms of size, and while the battery life isn't quite as good, it does have a full-fat Intel chip with decent onboard Iris Plus graphics, and of course, no issues around software compatibility. And for a similar price, you can get a much higher spec on the Pro 7. There is one more thing to consider though. Why buy the Pro X when you could have yourself an iPad Pro for a lot less money? And actually, this as just a usable experience is a lot nicer. All the apps here are optimized for the iPad. It also comes with a keyboard and a very nice pencil if you want to pay extra as well, and it's still cheaper than this. If you're just going to use this as a secondary device for when you're on the go, I kind of think the iPad Pro may be a better bet, for now at least. Hopefully, over the next year or so, as more ARM-based devices that are actually good and worth buying come out, the situation with compatibility and programs and also performance will improve. But right now, while I do love this for being beautifully engineered and a glimpse at the future of ultra portables, I just don't know who should actually buy this when you have options like the iPad Pro or the Surface Pro 7 as well, and they both offer better value. But what do you reckon of the Pro X? Would you consider buying it? And also, which would you go for between these three? Vote in the little poll at the top right and let me know. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. And if you do want to see more from me, then make sure you hit that little subscribe button down below. And I'll catch you next time right here on the Tech Chat.